Got it. Okay. Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome or welcome back to the Urban Ecology Center's Backyard Naturalist. My name is Tim, and whether you're part of my favorite Friday morning crew joining in live, or if you're watching this later, I am delighted to be spending time with you. A few days ago on the Washington Park Weekly Bird Walk, one of my favorite new friends, Zeke, asked me the question, Tim, what is your favorite bird? And I do get that question quite a bit. And I usually answer that with something like, oh, it's whatever bird I'm looking at the time, or they're all my favorite. But when Zeke asked me the question, the synapses in my brain caused my mouth to respond with, oh, that's easy. My favorite birds are crows. Second favorite is pelicans. And third favorite is vultures. And I don't normally like to rank favorites like that, but I did get a bit of a surprised reaction from Zeke, which was expected, that vultures were one of my favorite birds. And he asked me why. And I'm going to spend the next half hour making my case. But I think it starts with the idea that I like to pull for the underdog, for the less appreciated among our backyard wildlife community. And I think maybe other than Dean, who requested the vulture today, thank you, Dean. I think a lot of people cringe in some way when they hear the word vulture, or look away, or you know, when they think of a vulture, see a vulture, it may be visible, it may be subtle in your gut. And I'm not saying that you do this, although you might, but I think a lot of people do. So I hope you're sitting or standing comfortably and maybe sipping a nice beverage as we tell stories of the vulture that I hope will lead to a greater understanding and maybe a little more respect. And per usual, the Backyard Naturalist is part of the UEC In My Backyard website, and an extra special thank you to subscribers of the Backyard Naturalist. You are our foundation. And in a few weeks, a brand new season begins, and I hope you will consider purchasing or renewing your subscription so we can continue to bring you wonderful people who talk about wonderful things that are close to home. And also thank you to Urban Ecology Center members. If you are a member, you have until tomorrow to receive a 20% discount on 2 weeks of unlimited yoga at Collective Flow, which is a wellness studio at Kind Oasis on the east side of Milwaukee that describe themselves as on a mission to help you define and find your happiness through whole body health by infusing mindfulness into our yoga, fitness, and health coaching services. For more information, visit the UEC website or contact membership manager Glenna Holstein. And I'm also really excited for next week's talk, hosted by guest naturalist and research intern Chamong, on the iconic and patriotic bald eagle, which, spoiler alert, is not bald like today's featured animal, the turkey vulture, which is in fact bald and bald. So let's get started. To find the address of the turkey vulture in the tree of life, we know that it is a eukaryotic vertebrate bird animal in the order, which I think may have the best name of all the orders, Cathartiformes, which has the root in the word catharsis, which relates to cleansing and purification, the release of repressed emotion, which provides relief, or catharsis. So instead of the "you had me at hello," vultures had me at catharsis, which is why my relationship with this group of birds got off to a fantastic start. And quick side note, I don't know about you, but one of my favorite ways to journey towards catharsis is to play catch. If you ever ask me to play catch, no matter what I'm doing, I probably will say yes. So please ask me to play catch whenever you want and help me find my catharsis. The order Cathartiformes includes what we call the condors, or the New World vultures, as well as some extinct condors, which they found in the La Brea tar pits, that represent some of the largest flying birds ever to have lived. All of the living species of condors and New World vultures make up the family Cathartiformes, and there are 2 living species of condors today, enormous birds, the California condor and the Andean condor. And there are 5 living species of New World vultures, or vultures that live in the Americas. So you have the turkey vulture, the black vulture, the lesser yellow-headed vulture, the greater yellow-headed vulture, much to the consternation of my wife, who thinks it's demeaning to call some birds lesser and others greater. But and maybe my all-time favorite vulture, Sarcorampus papa, or the king vulture. That's a bird that my good friend Carlos in Costa Rica has been trying to get me to see for almost 20 years. And if you'd like a chance to see the king of vultures, consider joining the Urban Ecology Center's trip to Costa Rica in August of 2022, which is a trip focused on nesting sea turtles and calving humpback whales. And I mean, if you look at the slide, this is another reason just, I don't know, to love vultures, these awesome colors, the brilliant heads on a majestic soaring bird's body. So this is an image I'd like to conjure up when I think of vultures to replace those cringes. All 7 of these birds, the 5 vultures and the 2 condors, are considered New World vultures, which means that there's also some Old World vultures in the old country, in what we call the old country, from a very Western perspective here. So Africa and Europe and Asia and Australia. I don't know if you've seen the Jungle Book, but the singing vultures with the British accents look a lot like that white-backed vulture in the upper left, even though it's in Africa. And what's really fascinating to me is that these New World vultures, or these Old World vultures you're looking at, are not related to our vultures, even though they look and act very similar. This is a classic case of convergent evolution, where 2 unrelated groups of birds that are in a specific niche, which in this case is scavenging, have independently evolved similar adaptations, both behavioral and physical. And so they start looking and acting similarly to the other vultures, large body size, bald or reduced head feathers, weak feet, weak bills, and other traits, even though, again, they're not related. Evolution is so amazing that way. So here's some of the Old World vultures, which are in the order Accipitridae, which includes the accipiters, like our familiar Cooper's hawk. If you boil it down, the Old World vultures, like the Egyptian vulture on top here, they're related to the hawks and eagles, like that, whoops, sorry about that, like this harpy eagle. And the black vulture, which is a New World vulture on the lower end of the screen, the New World vultures are related to the storks. We think, like this wood stork. And when you look at externally and even behaviorally, it's easy to see the similarities between the New World vultures and the storks. And they share physical traits, they share behavioral traits, but much of the new evidence is starting to throw in doubt this relationship. That's kind of convenient and neat to point out. But the true place of the New World vultures is under a lot of debate, whether they should be grouped back with the accipiters, or whether they should have their own group. But while we wait for the story to pan out, we can still appreciate the beauty of the vulture. Most vultures, New World or Old World, tend to have bald heads, which makes a ton of sense since they stick those heads in pretty gross places because their primary food source is dead meat. And when I say stick their heads, and I mean they often will thrust their heads into carcasses to find the choicest bits, and for reasons we'll get into later. So they're detritivores. Some vultures are obligate detritivores, meaning they will only eat dead meat. There are other vultures that will, in a pinch, kill and eat live prey, like the black vultures, and some will even eat fruit. And as you could expect, the riper, the smushier, the better. They will go through garbage piles like a self-respecting gull. But unlike hawks, vultures are not adapted as killing machines. They're adapted as scavenging machines, which really endows them with this whole host of really cool adaptations in addition to this bald head. We see this in their feet. Some vultures' feet tend to look intimidating. A lot of them do look intimidating, especially the Old World vultures that evolved from the raptors. But pretty much across the board, vultures and condors have pretty weak feet. They are not raptors in the truest sense of the word. A raptor kills with its feet, captures with its feet. And vultures and condors use their feet to do other nefarious things like walking and hopping and balancing. And they don't even do that very well. Vultures on the ground are a little ungainly and unsteady. So those feet don't really help them a whole lot, but they do much better in the air. So they don't use their feet to grab, pierce, and tear. So while this bird looks like it might be honing in on prey for the kill, it's really just honing in on the ground for a landing, probably by a carcass.
What did we see that was eating?
Another adaptation to the scavenging lifestyle has to do with microflora and fauna living on and in vultures. So we did an episode recently on the human gut biome. Thanks, Chad. And the vulture gut biome just takes that whole system up to 11. They, first of all, they have extremely acidic stomachs. And what do you figure the pH of a vulture stomach acid is? 1, and even below 1, which is more acidic than a car battery acid, and it's 100 times more acidic than human stomach acid. In fact, vultures have the lowest gastric pH in the entire animal kingdom. But that makes sense when you consider that their food is likely harboring a smorgasbord of potentially pathogenic organisms. And so the stomach acid is really important. And then you throw in this very diverse gut biome, much more diverse than ours, and a very diverse skin biome. In fact, in vultures, the skin biome is more diverse than the gut biome, which is the opposite of humans. And it's really like these vultures have this little line of defense, this microscopic line of defense, this army on their skin that's really protecting them from a lot of the potentially bad stuff they're eating. So if you're a microorganism, you land on that skin, you're not going to do well. You're either going to be lost in the sea of diversity or you're going to be attacked. So if you combine that very acidic stomach and that very diverse skin biome and gut biome, there's very few pathogens that even have a chance against vultures. So they're very, very good at stopping pathogens. And that's probably one of the, I don't know, if for no other reason, why you should love vultures, because by eating the rotting flesh, they are often breaking the chain of many pathogens that can be harmful to humans. So, you know, the buck stops at their stomach. It's a dead end for potentially dangerous microbes like botulism and anthrax and cholera and salmonella. And the name of the vulture means cleansing. And vultures do a great job at removing these organisms from the landscape. So it's a really important service that vultures are performing for the world. And many cultures have long recognized this. And it's why a lot of cultures, not necessarily ours, have revered and respected the vultures. In fact, there's very strong evidence supporting the density of vultures and the spread of human diseases, a kind of inverse relationship. So if vulture populations go down, the incidence of human-borne diseases will often trend upward. Just like how opossums, if you have more opossums in your neighborhood, the tendency for Lyme disease goes down. So really important to think about how these malign creatures like vultures and possums are really doing a public health service. One thing that vultures will not bring to your life is the morning bird song, or any song for that matter, because vultures cannot sing. They don't have a syrinx. So what they can do is hiss like an angry cat, or at best they can grunt at you. So this is probably, unfortunately, a strike against the vulture in terms of human appreciation. But hey, they're not mosquitoes or ticks, so they do have that going for them. Another adaptation to the scavenging lifestyle is how they find their food. So predators will use things like stealth or speed or ambush or camouflage. And vultures, they just need to search the landscape for carrion. Quick aside, I was considering naming this episode "Carry On My Condor Son," but I didn't. And to help vultures search for carrion, some New World species have developed an excellent sense of smell, which is pretty uncommon in the bird world. Most birds have a poor or absent sense of smell, and they rely more on eyesight and hearing. And for those vultures that also have a less developed sense of smell, because not all of them have a good sense of smell, especially the old world vultures, they compensate by having excellent eyesight. So they pair these adaptations with the behavior of soaring to search for prey with their eyes or their nose or a little of both. And they do a very good job at finding prey or following other vultures to find prey. And that acute sense of smell to me is kind of a mixed blessing, because Yeah, it helps you find rotting flesh, but then you have to also smell it while you're eating it. So now you have the vulture soaring high in the air looking for prey. And of course, if you're lost in the desert without water and the pounding sun, and you look up and you see the circling vultures that are pretending you're imminent doom, they're waiting for you to die. That's actually a myth. They don't do that. They don't circle dying prey in anticipation of wanting to eat them. That doesn't happen at all. So we can debunk that myth. So first of all, vultures are not at all interested in live food for many reasons. There are some birds that can kill small animals in a pinch, but again, these are designed as scavengers, not predators. So even if you were to die in your unfortunate situation in the desert, these vultures wouldn't probably come down and just wait for you to be dead to eat you. So first of all, again, a lot of them are hunting by smell. So the smell that they're trying to hone in on is called ethyl mercaptan, and that's produced by decaying flesh. And so they are excellent at detecting it, but your body wouldn't produce it in high enough concentrations, probably for a couple of days. So, and even if the vultures circling you were the ones that hunt by sight, they are not interested in anything that moves, particularly something of your size. So if they saw you moving or struggling at all, they'd probably leave you alone that entire day. Vultures are extremely wary to land by a carcass because that, if it's still alive, it can hurt them. And they're most vulnerable when they're on the ground feeding. So even if they thought you were dead, they'd probably survey the area for quite a while, make sure there's no other predators around, or any other threats. Because again, they're most vulnerable when they're on the ground. So they're not interested in you. Don't worry about those vultures. Just worry about surviving and making it through that desert. And this is also a good time to point out that vultures are not seeking out the opposite. They're not seeking out the most putrid, rotting flesh around. They actually do prefer fresh meat over really putrid meat. If the meat is too fresh, it might be hard for them to eat it. Again, their feet, and we'll learn their beaks, aren't very strong. They really can't tear into fresh flesh. But if it's too putrid, they'll go away from it too. Even they have standards. So think of it as trying to eat an avocado. If it's freshly picked, it's too hard to eat, but if you wait too long, it becomes this inedible mush. And so the vultures are kind of looking for that in between. And once they found their prey and they feel, comfortable enough to start eating, and here's some turkey vultures at a seal carcass, they still need to be wary of their surroundings because again, they're vulnerable on the ground. So they're going to try to eat as much food as fast as they can to remove themselves from that vulnerable situation. And one of the reasons why they thrust their head into that carcass, they're really trying to move fast. And at some point, inevitably, other scavengers are going to show up. It could be other vultures. The vultures that use smell to find food will often find it first, and then other vultures will follow those vultures to the carcass. And sometimes the vultures that come later are going to be more dominant and shoo them away. So they're trying to eat as quickly as they can. It could be a larger predator, like here a bald eagle, or in other parts, a hyena or a lion. So they're trying to eat as quickly before something else comes to chase them off. And that majestic bald eagle that Chemang will be featuring next week, if a vulture is feeling too threatened, or if something were to get hold of it or scare it, as a last line of defense, it will projectile vomit. And we know what's in that stomach acid. It's pretty nasty. And it's a really good defense mechanism because, who wants to get covered in vulture vomit? But another interesting take on this is that the vomit is also used as a diversion technique. They're eating fast, so they're eating big chunks of food, right? And if it just vomited out a pretty tasty hunk of meat on the ground, that in some ways is saying to whatever, hey, don't try to get me. I just gave you a really nice hunk of meat. You should eat that instead. And there is evidence to support that this majestic bald eagle actually prefers to eat chunks of meat from the vulture's mouth than to try and tear off its own hunk of meat from the carcass. It's like that Saturday Night Live episode with the restaurant Pre-Chewed Charlie, where the waiters chew their food for you. The bald eagle's waiting for the vulture to tear off the chunk and give it to him. So if you still think of the bald eagle as this majestic patriotic image and the vulture as this skulking dirty creature, just remember who eats whose vomit. All right. Another strike probably against vultures could be this adaptation that they pee on their legs. So, and before you judge too much, there are, as strange as it sounds, instances where humans will pee on their feet in the shower to help fight off parasites or fungus. It's actually pretty common among athletes. But no, we don't make it a regular habit of peeing all over our legs. So why do vultures do it? Two important reasons. First, it allows them to thermoregulate in really hot environments. Birds don't sweat like we do, so it'll have a cooling effect on their entire body as the liquid evaporates. And then second, there's another layer of protection from the many parasites that they're exposed to at a carcass, right? So they've got that skin biome, and now they've also got this the pee that is helping to ward off infection or other microbes. So the pee is quite toxic to those microbes. And they do share this behavior with some storks. And so when you see vulture or stork legs with that crusty look to them, that's their pee. And you know, it is a little gross, but it's very effective and allows vultures and crane or storks to be quite successful. This process is called Urohidrosis. And I've been using the word pee, which I will admit is kind of a euphemism because bird droppings consist of both feces and urine together. So technically they're both peeing and pooping on their legs, but I feel I need to give vultures a break when I can. So let's just stick to calling it peeing on their legs. And I also found that in addition to storks, vultures, and the odd humans, some seals will cool themselves while basking by peeing on their hind flippers. But in that case, it is just pee. If you take a close look at the vulture bill, you see some fascinating adaptations. And just as the talons may appear intimidating, this bill may also appear intimidating. But again, it is a relatively weak bill, which is one of the reasons why it's hard for them to eat fresh carcasses. And you know, rotting flesh tends to be a little softer than fresh flesh, so they don't need a lot of tearing power. But that being said, their bills are still strong. And you wouldn't want to be bitten or scratched, for that matter, by a vulture, mainly because of that diverse skin flora and fauna that would introduce a whole community of bacteria to your body if they were to puncture your skin, and you would want to get some powerful treatment pretty fast. Another thing you notice here is that the nostrils are oval and they're embedded in this waxy structure that covers the bill called the cere. And the nasal passage is not divided into two parts with a septum like our nose is. And so from the side, you can see right through the nasal passage. And if we're to bring a picture of a bald eagle, you will also see that vulture eyes are not protected and shaded by a brow bone, as is the case in most eagles and hawks. And again, that's probably has to do with the wanting to keep their head as clean as possible. New World vultures do not build nests. Old World vultures do. But the New World vultures lay their eggs directly on the ground, or sometimes they'll do a little scrape. It could be on a platform. It could be in an abandoned building. It could be abandoned nests from other species. And again, they pretty much just make a depression and then lay the eggs right on top of whatever site they choose. So now that was kind of vultures in general, and the only vulture we regularly get in Milwaukee and Wisconsin and Massachusetts and Colorado, pretty much the northern half of the United States, is the turkey vulture, Cathartes ora. So we already talked about the root of cathartes as purifier or cleaner. Both of the yellow-headed vultures are also in this genus, and ora comes from aurora, which is an indigenous Mexican name for this bird. It's pretty obvious to me why it's called a turkey vulture. In fact, on a social media site recently, someone posted a picture of the Wauwatosa turkeys perched on their front porch. And even though I knew there were turkeys, I did a double take and I questioned whether they might have been vultures. They looked so much like vultures. But then I remembered it was February, and there's no way turkey vultures would be in Wisconsin in February anyway. But they just look so much like vultures. So that's why they're called turkey vultures. And the word vulture comes from Latin, and it means to tear in reference to its feeding habits. The turkey vulture is known colloquially as the turkey buzzard, or sometimes just the plain buzzard. It's also called the carrion crow or the John crow in some parts of the Caribbean. A group of vultures is called a committee, a venue, or a volt. If they're flying, they're called a kettle. And if they're feeding, they are appropriately called a wake. A wake, not awake like the opposite of asleep, a wake. It is truly an American vulture, reaching from the tip of South America up to the northern part of the continental US. And it's fairly easy to recognize a turkey vulture in flight. They rarely flap their wings. They use those broad, large wings to glide almost exclusively with their wings tilted upwards in a slight V shape, looking for thermals. They'll often teeter with this fixed wing pattern, where hawks and eagles especially, have their wings kind of straight out, and you'll see them flapping much more regularly. But vultures are gliding specialists, either when they're searching for prey, or they're migrating, or they're moving to a roost site, and they gather in roost sites in very large numbers. If you are up early enough and lucky in the morning, you'll sometimes find turkey vultures in what's called the heraldic pose. And the vulture is absorbing the morning sun to help raise its body temperature. And if you're thinking, hey, vultures are endothermic, why would they need to raise their body temperature like a reptile? It's because, particularly in colder weather in the north, they will lower their body temperature at night from their normal 104 degrees down to about 93 degrees Fahrenheit. So this morning ritual does help them warm up their body so they can get up in the air. And it also dries their feathers. So you'll see them doing this more frequently after damp or rainy nights. And it helps to reduce the bacterial load on the feathers, right? They want the bacteria on their skin, but not on their feathers. Unfortunately, if you're already a little weirded out by turkey vultures and you're walking through the woods and you come up to this cultish site, if you're not superstitious already, you probably will be and may freak out just a bit, but those vultures are oriented toward the sun, and you know what they're doing. And they also have a cult-like ritualistic courtship where males and females gather in a circle and kind of hop around the perimeter of the circle with their wings partially spread in the air. So if you didn't think they were witches or demons in that last pictures in the heraldic pose, you probably would after seeing their courtship. And I realize this is black vultures, but couldn't find a good turkey vulture courtship picture. So how's the turkey vulture doing today? Pretty well. Here, the turkey vulture is doing well. They're protected by the Migratory Bird Act. Like a lot of birds, they did get hit with DDT and other pesticides, but their numbers are fairly stable. One continual threat, at least in, throughout the US, is lead shot that's left in carcasses by hunters. Lead is often used in hunting and fishing because it's cheaper. And for hunters, lead fragments on impact. But lead is very bad for the environment, of course. And if vultures ingest it, it will likely be deadly. Like any carrion specialist, they're exposed to any chemicals or poisons used by humans to kill pests. And people still will illegally kill vultures, thinking that they're dirty or spreading diseases or that they're killing their livestock. But that's a sad case of mistaken knowledge, because turkey vultures in particular do not kill any living animal, and they do not spread diseases. They stop them. There are several instances where declines in vulture populations around the world have led to increases in human health hazards, as I mentioned. So one example is if vulture populations decrease, it can lead to increases in feral dogs and rats, which do carry threatening diseases that can harm humans. There's an interesting case in India where the population of the Oriental white-backed vultures and some others dropped precipitously because of an anti-inflammatory drug used by the cattle industry. And even in very small doses, that drug is deadly to vultures. And so vultures were dying all over the place. And it was bad. And ultimately, you'd think, but if the vultures are feeding on livestock, they're feeding on livestock that's already dead. And they're preventing the spread of diseases among the dead cattle. And so when the vultures went away, these diseases started spreading, kind of unchecked among the cattle, like anthrax and brucellosis. So the government recognized and the ranchers recognized, how important vultures are, not only to the community, but to their economy. So there's been a huge and successful effort to bring back the vulture populations there. So I don't know. I hope I've highlighted some of the reasons why vultures are objectively super cool. I think we could all agree, or I hope you're a little closer on your journey of respect than when we started. But again, I still think most people probably don't look at vultures with awe and respect. Again, I think more people will cringe or look away or show signs of disgust. And it's easy to see why that dominates our culture. And I'm here in the West, in the United States. And you can think of that as you juxtapose the vulture with the American robin. So I think objectively, we all love this bird, right? It's the state bird of Wisconsin. It sings beautifully. Oh yeah, right. Okay, I need a better example. Darn you, John Gerda, for writing a scathing editorial on the robin. So how about the chestnut-sided Oriole? This is an objectively cute bird with striking colors, a beautiful song, happily hops around eating berries. And I think most people would call it a bird, maybe not beautiful, but cute or delightful. And then you compare that to the vulture. They don't eat berries, they eat rotting flesh. They're not particularly colorful. They don't hop around playfully. They're either sulking or tripping around like a miser or pretending you're doom. They pee on their legs. If you try to sneak up on one, it'll vomit on you. And when they try to serenade you, they can only grunt. But that's looking at this bird through one cultural lens and definition. In many cultures, again, throughout time and around the world, vultures were and are revered. So independently across the world, human cultures have created spaces to bring their dead relatives and friends, not to be buried or cremated, but to be presented to be given to the vultures for purification. So many believe that vultures help free your spirit from the burdens of your flesh, so that you can soar to the heavens. And that is the ultimate explanation of catharsis to me. So I hope you, like many of your ancestors, can see the vulture for the good it brings to your life and to the world. So thank you for joining me today. And I will stop sharing my screen.